Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Brooke Logan had lived through betrayals, scandals, public humiliations, and private heartbreaks, but nothing quite prepared her for the slow, corrosive realization that someone was deliberately trying to destroy her from the inside out. Not with one explosive act, but with 1,000 quiet cuts that all traced back to the same place, the Logan name. It started subtly, almost invisibly, the way these things always do. A misplaced contract at Forrester Creations that cost Brooke a crucial meeting. A charity board suddenly questioning her leadership after anonymous complaints appeared out of nowhere. A fashion editor canceling an interview at the last minute, citing concerns she couldn't quite articulate. At first, Brooke brushed it off as bad luck, the kind that followed her like a shadow no matter how hard she tried to step into the light. She told herself she was imagining patterns where none existed, that years of being judged and blamed had trained her to expect the worst. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It sat heavy in her chest, an ache of suspicion that deepened every time someone looked at her with just a little too much doubt in their eyes. By the time the Forrester board began whispering about whether Brooke Logan had become a liability rather than an asset, she knew this wasn't coincidence, it was sabotage. And the most terrifying part wasn't the attacks themselves, but how personal they felt, as if the saboteur knew exactly where to strike to make her bleed. Brooke's instincts screamed that this wasn't an outsider, not Sheila, not some jealous rival from the fashion world. This was someone who knew her history, her mistakes, her vulnerabilities. Someone who understood that the Logan name, once her greatest strength, could also be turned into a weapon. As Brooke dug deeper, following paper trails and whispered rumors, every road seemed to lead back to the same devastating possibility: Katie. Her sister. Her confidant. The woman who had stood by her through countless storms. The idea felt obscene, almost blasphemous, and Brooke fought it with everything she had. She remembered late nights in the kitchen, the two of them sharing coffee and secrets. She remembered Katie defending her when the world turned cruel, reminding her that no matter what mistakes she made, she was still a Logan, still worthy of love. But memories Brooke was learning could lie. Or worse, they could hide truths too painful to face. The breaking point came when Brooke discovered that a legal challenge against Logan Estates, an entity tied directly to her personal legacy, had been filed under a shell company that traced back to an investment firm Katie had quietly partnered with months earlier. The betrayal hit Brooke like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. She confronted Katie not with accusations at first, but with questions, desperate for reassurance, for an explanation that would make everything make sense again. But Katie's reaction wasn't the denial Brooke expected. It was cool, controlled, almost rehearsed. And in that moment Brooke saw a version of her sister she didn't recognize. A woman hardened by resentment, her eyes sharp with years of unspoken pain. Katie didn't scream or cry. She didn't apologize. Instead, she calmly told Brooke that this war had been inevitable, that the Logan name had become synonymous with Brooke's choices, Brooke's scandals, Brooke's endless ability to fall and be forgiven while everyone else paid the price. Katie confessed that she was tired of living in Brooke's shadow, tired of watching her sister be celebrated and protected while the rest of the family quietly cleaned up the messes left behind. Every headline, every whispered judgment about the Logans, Katie argued, always circled back to Brooke. And she was done letting that happen. What began as a confrontation exploded into an all-out war, not just between two sisters but between two visions of what it meant to be a Logan. Brooke defended herself fiercely, her voice shaking with anger and heartbreak as she reminded Katie of everything she had sacrificed, every time she had owned her mistakes and fought to do better. She accused Katie of rewriting history, of using old wounds as justification for cruelty. Katie fired back that Brooke had always had the luxury of redemption, while others were expected to quietly endure the fallout. The argument spilled beyond the walls of Brooke's home and into the public sphere, dragging the entire Logan family into the crossfire. Donna tried desperately to mediate, her heart breaking as she watched the two women she loved most tear each other apart. She begged them to remember who they were to each other, to stop before the damage became irreversible. But the war had already taken on a life of its own. Leaked documents surfaced painting Brooke as reckless and untrustworthy, her past mistakes dredged up and repackaged as evidence of a pattern she could never escape. Brooke countered by exposing Katie's financial maneuvers, forcing the world to see that the sabotage hadn't come from some faceless enemy, but from within her own family. Forrester Creations became a battleground, with alliances shifting daily as Ridge, torn between loyalty and love, struggled to understand how everything had gone so wrong. He confronted Brooke, demanding the truth, and when she told him everything, every suspicion, every piece of evidence, every heartbreak, he saw the devastation in her eyes and realized this wasn't another Logan drama manufactured by gossip. This was real. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in waves, quiet at first, then relentless, rippling through every corner of Brooke Logan's life. In the days following that explosive family gathering, the house felt different, as if the walls themselves remembered the shouting, the tears, the moment when blood ties cracked under the weight of long-buried truths. Brooke moved through her home like a ghost, touching familiar surfaces as if to reassure herself they were still real. Every photo on the mantel told a story that now felt altered, rewritten by betrayal. Her phone buzzed constantly. Messages from colleagues, reporters circling like vultures, friends who didn't know which side they were supposed to stand on. Some offered support. Others asked questions that felt like accusations dressed up as concern. Brooke answered none of them. For the first time in her life, she didn't trust her own voice not to break. Katie, meanwhile, experienced the aftermath in a different way, outwardly composed, inwardly unraveling. She had won the opening battle, at least on paper. The shell company filings were legal. The contracts airtight. The damage to Brooke's reputation very real. And yet, victory tasted bitter. Everywhere Katie went, she felt the absence of something she hadn't known she still needed. Her sister's belief in her. People looked at her differently now. Some with admiration, others with suspicion. The word ruthless followed her through Forrester Creations like a whisper that never quite faded. She told herself this was the cost of leadership, of making hard decisions no one else was brave enough to make. But late at night, alone with her thoughts, the justification rang hollow. She replayed Brooke's face during that final confrontation. The hurt, the disbelief, the quiet devastation that cut deeper than any shouted insult. Katie had expected anger. She hadn't expected grief. Forrester Creations found itself at the center of the storm, pulled into the sisters' war whether it wanted to be or not. Ridge struggled daily to keep the company from imploding under the weight of personal drama masquerading as corporate crisis. Investors demanded answers. Designers whispered in hallways. Meetings turned tense as every decision seemed loaded with implications beyond profit margins. Ridge tried to remain neutral, but neutrality proved impossible when emotions ran this high. He confronted Katie privately, pressing her to admit what this was really about. She gave him the same polished explanation she'd given everyone else, that she was protecting the Logan legacy, ensuring stability, doing what Brooke never could. Ridge listened, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he asked a single question that left her speechless. If this is about the Logan name, why does it feel like it's really about punishing Brooke? Katie had no answer that didn't expose wounds she wasn't ready to acknowledge. Donna found herself caught in the middle, her heart pulled apart by loyalty and love. She visited Brooke daily, bringing food that went untouched, offering comfort that sometimes landed and sometimes didn't. She tried, gently at first, then more urgently, to get Brooke to see Katie's perspective, to remember that hurt people hurt people. But Brooke wasn't ready for empathy. She felt stripped bare, not just by Katie's actions but by the realization that her own family had been keeping score for years, tallying her failures while she believed they were healing together. "I thought we were past this," she told Donna one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought we'd forgiven each other." Donna could only hold her hand, knowing forgiveness didn't always arrive when it was needed most. As the weeks passed, the sabotage took on new forms. A former ally testified against Brooke in a legal dispute tied to Logan Estates, citing concerns about her pattern of instability. Old scandals resurfaced online, repackaged with fresh outrage. Brooke's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Each headline felt like another stone added to the weight pressing on her chest. And yet, something unexpected began to happen beneath the noise. Quietly, steadily, people who truly knew Brooke started to speak up. Former employees shared stories of her generosity. Charities defended her integrity. Even rivals admitted, begrudgingly, that she'd been an easy target for a long time. The narrative didn't flip overnight, but cracks appeared in the version of Brooke Logan as perpetual villain. Katie watched this shift with mixed emotions. Part of her bristled at the idea that Brooke might emerge from this stronger, once again resilient in the face of destruction. Another part felt relief she couldn't explain. The war had taken more from her than she'd anticipated. Sleep, peace, the illusion that she could control outcomes without consequence. She began to question whether her crusade had ever truly been about the Logan name, or whether it had been fueled by years of resentment she'd never fully confronted. Therapy sessions she'd once dismissed as unnecessary became a lifeline, a place where she could finally say out loud the things she'd always swallowed. The jealousy, the hurt, the fear of being invisible next to a sister who took up so much space simply by existing. The turning point came unexpectedly, during a crisis that had nothing to do with contracts or reputations. Brooke collapsed at home one evening, the result of exhaustion, stress, and weeks of barely eating. Donna found her just in time. The hospital room felt eerily familiar, a place where Logan women had waited through births, deaths, and countless scares. When Katie arrived, summoned by Donna's frantic call, she hesitated outside the door, her hand hovering inches from the handle. For the first time since the war began, she was afraid, not of losing control, but of losing her sister entirely. Inside, Brooke lay pale against white sheets, monitors beeping softly, her usual strength reduced to something fragile and human. Katie sat beside her bed, tears she hadn't planned spilling freely. "I didn't want this," she whispered, unsure if Brooke could hear her. "I just wanted to matter." Brooke woke to see Katie there, and for a long moment neither spoke. The silence was heavy but different now, less explosive, more uncertain. Brooke broke it first, her voice weak but steady. "If you wanted to matter," she said, "you already did." The words landed with more force than any accusation. Katie broke down then, confessing everything she buried for years, the feeling of being second best, the pain of loving the same man, the resentment of watching Brooke be forgiven while she carried quiet scars. Brooke listened, really listened, and in that moment something shifted. Forgiveness didn't magically erase the damage. Trust wasn't restored in a single conversation. But the truth, raw and unfiltered, created space for something new. Not reconciliation yet, but understanding. The hospital stay became a pause in the war, forcing everyone to slow down and reassess. Ridge visited, conflicted but concerned. He and Brooke talked late into the night about identity, about how easy it was for people to define her by her worst moments. He admitted his own failures, the times he'd pulled away when standing by her would have been harder. Brooke didn't absolve him outright, but she appreciated the honesty. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen not as a symbol or a problem but as a person. When Brooke was released, she made a decision that surprised everyone. She stepped back from the public fight, issuing a statement that acknowledged her past without apologizing for existing. She refused to engage in further mudslinging, choosing instead to focus on rebuilding privately. The move confused critics and unsettled Katie, who realized too late that the battlefield she'd chosen was no longer Brooke's. The war over the Logan name had burned itself out, leaving behind scorched earth and the possibility, however fragile, of renewal. Katie followed suit, dissolving the shell company and withdrawing the legal challenge. Publicly, she framed it as a strategic shift. Privately, she knew it was an act of surrender, not defeat but release. She reached out to Brooke cautiously, aware that healing would be slow, uneven, and entirely on Brooke's terms. Brooke accepted the olive branch without celebration, her boundaries firm but not cruel. They were sisters bound by history and blood, but the relationship would have to be rebuilt honestly, without illusions. As life at Forrester Creations steadied, the Logan family began to redefine itself, not as a flawless unit, but as one willing to confront its fractures. Donna remained the quiet glue, hopeful but realistic. Ridge watched from the sidelines, recognizing that love didn't always mean choosing sides. It sometimes meant letting people fight their own battles. And Brooke, standing once again at a crossroads, felt something she hadn't in a long time: clarity. She understood now that being a Logan meant carrying contradictions, strength and vulnerability, mistakes and survival. No one else got to decide which parts defined her. The question of who sabotaged Brooke Logan no longer mattered as much as what came next. The war had revealed uncomfortable truths, forced reckonings, and left scars that would never fully fade. But it also stripped away illusions, exposing the raw humanity beneath years of rivalry and resentment. In true Bold and the Beautiful fashion, the story didn't end with perfect resolution, but with possibility, a fragile, hard-earned hope that even after betrayal, even after war, there might still be room for healing, growth, and a redefinition of what family really means. Brooke's day had started with the kind of quiet optimism that rarely lasted more than a few minutes in her life. She had convinced herself, not for the first time, that she could somehow navigate the treacherous waters of family politics and still maintain her dignity, her reputation, and her sense of self. But as she stepped into Forrester Creations' sleek, glass-walled boardroom that morning, the subtle tension in the air was undeniable. Katie was already there, perched on the edge of a chair like a predator sizing up prey. Her laptop open but her eyes entirely focused on Brooke. There was a chill to the way she looked at her sister, one that Brooke recognized all too well. "Good morning, Katie," Brooke began, her voice deliberately even, a soft smile in place despite the storm she could feel brewing. Katie didn't return the smile. Instead, she closed her laptop with a sharp snap that echoed across the room. "Morning," she said, the single word loaded with an unspoken accusation. "We need to talk about the Logan name." Brooke's stomach sank. She had anticipated tension, yes, but Katie had a way of making every conflict feel like an ambush, every disagreement a personal war. "What about it?" she asked cautiously, leaning against the table. "I don't think there's anything to discuss that we haven't already been through." Katie's jaw tightened and she leaned forward, placing her hands flat on the table. "Don't play coy with me, Brooke. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The Logan name, what it represents, the power it carries, and more importantly, who gets to benefit from it. I have serious concerns about how it's being used, and frankly, I think it's time someone took a stand." Brooke felt the familiar heat rise in her cheeks. She had anticipated that the Logan sisters would clash again. History had a way of repeating itself, but she hadn't expected it to happen with such raw intensity so early in the morning. "Katie, this is ridiculous. The Logan name is not a weapon. It's a legacy, a family name that carries history, love, and dedication. It's not something you can just control or police." Katie's eyes narrowed. "Control? Brooke, I'm not talking about control. I'm talking about responsibility. Someone seems intent on sabotaging it, on undermining what Mom built. And I think it's been you, whether you realize it or not." The words hit Brooke like a punch. Sabotage? She had been careful, meticulous even in her dealings. She wasn't naive and she certainly wasn't a fool, but Katie's accusation struck at the heart of her integrity, something Brooke held fiercely. "Me? Sabotaging the Logan name? Katie, I would never." Katie cut her off with a harsh laugh, the sound brittle and sharp. "Oh, please, Brooke. Don't act like you're innocent. Every move you've made lately seems to have one goal: to elevate yourself at the expense of everyone else. You can pretend it's for the family, for the company, but we both know the truth. And you know it too." Brooke took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions threatening to overtake her. She had dealt with her fair share of betrayals, manipulations, and misunderstandings over the years, but hearing Katie lay this at her feet felt like an entirely new level of personal attack. "Katie, I don't know what you're talking about. I've always tried to do what's best for the family. You know me, you know that. If there's a problem with the Logan name, it's not because of me. It's because of someone trying to stir trouble, someone who wants to see us divided." Katie leaned back slightly, her eyes sharp and calculating. "And who would that be, Brooke? Come on, think. Who stands to gain the most from causing chaos between us?" Brooke hesitated, realizing that Katie wasn't just looking for answers. She was probing, testing, trying to corner her into admitting some hidden agenda she didn't even have. I don't know," she said slowly, choosing her words with care. "I don't have anyone in mind. But Katie, accusing me isn't going to solve anything. We need to figure out who's really behind this, not tear each other apart." Katie's expression softened slightly, just enough to make Brooke question whether this was the calm before an even bigger storm. "I want to believe you, Brooke. I really do. But every time I turn around, there's another rumor, another misstep, and it always seems to lead back to you. I can't ignore that anymore. Something has to be done before the Logan name is completely tarnished." Brooke felt the weight of the words pressing down on her. Katie wasn't just worried about the company. She was worried about the family legacy, about the very essence of what it meant to be a Logan. And somehow, Brooke had become the focal point of that anxiety. Katie, I swear to you, I would never intentionally hurt the Logan name. You know me. You've always known me. Someone is manipulating the situation. Maybe even right under our noses, but it isn't me. Katie's eyes glimmered with a mix of skepticism and lingering suspicion. Maybe. But until we figure that out, Brooke, I'm watching every move you make. I hope you understand that. This isn't just about you and me. It's about protecting everything Mom and Dad worked for. If you're innocent, then you have nothing to worry about. But if there's even a hint that you're involved, I won't hesitate to act. The tension between the sisters was palpable. A storm cloud hovering over the boardroom that neither of them knew how to dissipate. Brooke felt the familiar sting of frustration, the kind that had followed her through decades of family drama, romantic entanglements, and corporate intrigue. She wanted to shout, to argue, to prove herself, but she also knew that doing so would only play into Katie's hands. Instead, she chose her words with precision, a practiced calm masking the fury beneath. Katie, I understand your concerns. I do. But let's focus on the facts, not assumptions. We need to find the real saboteur before anyone else gets hurt. The Logan name deserves better than us fighting each other blindly. Katie's gaze softened, but only slightly. Fine, Brooke. For now. But mark my words, I'm not letting this go. Not until we uncover the truth. And if it comes down to it, I'll protect the Logan name, even if it means standing against you. Brooke nodded, a heavy weight settling in her chest. She knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The seeds of distrust had been sown, and even if she uncovered the person truly responsible for the sabotage, repairing the bond with Katie would take far longer than the fallout from any corporate maneuvering. As they left the boardroom, the tension followed them like an invisible shadow. Outside, the familiar buzz of Los Angeles carried on, oblivious to the war brewing within one of its most iconic families. Brooke couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And deep down, she knew that the Logan name was far more vulnerable than she had ever imagined. Later that evening, Brooke found herself in her office, the city lights casting long shadows across the walls. She stared at a photo of her parents, Eric and Stephanie Logan, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on her. She loved her family, loved the legacy they had built, but she also realized that love alone couldn't shield her from betrayal. Not in the Logan family, not ever. Her phone buzzed and she picked it up to see a text from an unknown number. Stop pretending, Brooke. You're next. A chill ran down her spine. The threat was clear and the handwriting, or rather the tone, was unmistakably calculated. Someone was orchestrating a plan to dismantle everything she had worked for, and Brooke knew that exposing the culprit would require more than just wit and courage. It would demand the full measure of her resilience, every ounce of her Logan spirit. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment, letting the city's glow seep into the room. She had faced countless storms before, but this one was different. This one was personal, dangerous, and it threatened the very foundation of her identity. And yet, despite the fear gnawing at her, a spark of determination ignited within her. She would uncover the saboteur. She would protect the Logan name. And she would do whatever it took to survive this war, because Brooke Logan didn't back down. By the next morning, the atmosphere at Forrester Creations was electric. Rumors had begun to swirl among the employees, whispers of corporate espionage and personal vendettas flying through the hallways. Brooke could feel the eyes of the staff on her as she moved through the building, every glance a reminder that the Logan name was now both a shield and a target. Katie, predictably, was already in her office when Brooke arrived. She didn't look up as Brooke entered, her fingers flying over her keyboard as if composing some critical message. Brooke paused in the doorway, measuring her words carefully. Katie, I want you to know I'm serious about finding out who's behind all this. We can't let this escalate any further. Katie finally looked up, her expression guarded. I hope so, Brooke. Because if we don't handle this soon, the Logan name could be ruined forever. And if that happens, there's no turning back. Brooke nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She understood the stakes better than anyone. The Logan name wasn't just a family legacy. It was a symbol of power, resilience, and influence in the cutthroat world of fashion and media. Losing it or seeing it tarnished was unthinkable. The day unfolded with a series of subtle power plays, quiet accusations, and pointed questions. Every interaction Brooke had felt like a chess match, with hidden threats lurking behind every word. She had always been adept at navigating this world, but the stakes had never felt higher. Whoever was sabotaging the Logan name was cunning, patient, and ruthless, and Brooke realized she would have to be smarter, faster, and more strategic than ever before. As night fell, Brooke returned home, her mind racing with possibilities, suspects, and strategies. She knew that the battle with Katie was far from over, that trust within her own family had been fractured, and that the true saboteur remained hidden, plotting their next move. But one thing was certain: Brooke Logan would not be defeated, not by whispers, not by threats, and certainly not by anyone trying to undermine the legacy she had fought so hard to protect. The war over the Logan name had just begun, and Brooke was ready to face it head-on, with courage, determination, and a fire that no saboteur could extinguish.